Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to dive deep into one of the most interesting behind the scenes stories coming out of the game world right now. ARC Raiders. You may know it as the much anticipated extraction shooter from Embark Studios, but there's one element of its design that the devs themselves call an accident. And that accident just might be one of the game's coolest features. So stick around because we're going to unpack how this happened, why it matters, what it tells us about game design and marketing, and how you, as a player, might actually benefit from it. Let's start with what ARC Raiders actually is. This is a third-person player versus environment extraction shooter developed and published by Embark Studios. In the game, you step into the future Earth where mysterious robot forces called the Ark have taken over the surface. Humanity forced underground, and teams of raiders go up to the top side to scavenge materials, fight both AI and other players, and attempt to extract with loot. The game is set for full release on October 30th, 2025. Embark Studios themselves have roots in some very respectable shooter franchises, lending credibility to this whole endeavor. Now, usually when you talk about a cool feature in a game, you expect it's been meticulously planned, tested, balanced, marketed, but here the devs admit one of the features that players are already calling really meaningful happened almost by accident. And that's what we're going to dig into. So what exactly is this unexpected gem in ARC Raiders? During a recent interview with the game's design director, Virgil Watkins at Pocket Tactics, he's explained that there was a mechanic around death and spectating that they hadn't initially intended to have the impact it ended up having. Originally, when a player got downed or killed, the camera would linger on the fallen character. You would see your teammate loot you or watch the action unfold. But after seeing how demoralizing that was for many players, the team changed it. They made it so that when you go down, instead of a long spectate mode, you get a quick, sharp cut to black, a sudden moment of, oh, that was it? The defeat is delivered in a punchy instant rather than a drawn-out linger, Watkins says. We almost did it by accident, and that's because it happened with little fanfare. It seemed to have a psychological shift effect. Players didn't dwell on their defeat, they accepted it and came back quicker. In his words, we just made it cut to black, just sharp, and you're like, that was like a moment. That seemed to have a bit of a switch where people's psychology around that moment went from dwelling on their defeat to like, oh, it was a punctuation. So in short, a streamlined spectate cut to black death mechanic, born more out of iteration and observation than grand design, ended up giving the game a unique emotional heartbeat. This little pivot is being called one of the coolest features of ARC Raiders, not because it's flashy or giant or front page worthy, but because it subtly changes your experience as a player in a meaningful way. It helps make losing feel less punishing, more of a signal, okay, you failed, try again, rather than watch someone else loot you for 2 minutes. And that change came from a bit of a happy accident, a realization mid-development. Why does this even matter? Well, for one, it shows a refreshing attitude towards design and player psychology. Many extraction shooters lean into harshness and penalty. You die, you lose everything, you spectate. The pain lingers. Arc Raiders seems to be acknowledging that you can retain tension and stakes, but you don't have to punish players into feeling miserable. That shift matters in how welcoming the game is and how much players will want to come back. Watkins says even that two of their core pillars are respecting your time and ensuring losses aren't soul-destroying. So this accidental feature aligns strongly with their design philosophy. Secondly, the fact that this feature emerged organically almost by accident rather than being top-down mandated is interesting because it suggests the devs were paying attention to player feedback, to emotional response, and willing to make changes. It offers players confidence that the game may continue to evolve in thoughtful ways. Third, from a marketing and community perspective, it gives the game a talking point. One of the coolest features was an accident is a headline. People are curious. That little anecdote becomes part of the lore of the game prior to the release, which helps build anticipation in a more humanized way because players like to know that devs are human, realizing things mid-development, making tweaks, it creates a connection. And lastly, the feature also influences how the game plays out. If you know that the defeat will feel like a cut to black moment rather than lingering heartbreak, you may lean into more risk-taking, more bold play. It subtly changes mindset, which means the way Arc Raiders feels could in part hinge on this unplanned pivot. The story doesn't exist in isolation. Arc Raiders has seen several shifts during its development lifecycle. It originally launched as a cooperative player versus environment shooter, but later pivoted toward a more extraction shooter, player versus environment format. The game's design has been responsive to feedback, playtest, and data. Watkins mentions that after their tech test 2, they really critically looked at the feedback and data we had and made what he called very accurate decisions from tech test to launch. The accidental cut to black death mechanic is consistent with that culture of iteration and refinement. Also interesting is another happy accident of sorts. The game's name being accidentally censored in lobby chat of Call of Duty Black Ops 7 and previously in the AA app chat. When players typed Arc Raiders, it just appeared as asterisk. This glitch-turned publicity isn't the feature Watkins was discussing, but it shows how unexpected events around the game keep stemming from accidental origins, and yet they build attention, engagement, and culture. Embark Studios even leaned into it and joked, "We're still on track to release," just asterisk, on October 30th as a promotional tweet. So the game seems to be getting traction both for design decisions and for accidental quirks in its ecosystem. If you're a player looking ahead toward Arc Raiders, what does this all imply for you? First, you should expect that there will be tension, stakes, and meaningful choices. That's extraction shooter territory after all. The game might feel friendlier than some of its harsher competitors. Knowing that at least one of its mechanics is tuned to reduce the sting of failure suggests a more thoughtful experience around how you recover, how you get back in the fight. Second, this gives you something to pay attention to. Watch how the death moment in Arc Raiders plays out in gameplay previews or your early runs. Does the cut to black really feel like a moment rather than a drag? Is the transition away from spectating smooth? How does your emotional response differ from other extraction shooters you've tried? This feature might seem small, but it could shift the flow of how you play, how you risk, how you feel. Third, it signals that the game devs are listening and iterating. So if you engage in early access or tech test, your feedback might matter in tangible ways. And because one of the big changes came from an accidental but positive reaction, it may open the door for more emergent design. That means new features might come from community reaction, from play nuance, from data, not just from a feature list. Fourth, it sets expectations. While the game is still hardcore in its objectives, loot, extract, fight players, and AI, it may avoid the most punishing traps some titles fall into. It's not going to be low stakes, but soul-destroying losses may be less frequent. That could mean a broader audience could dive in, not just veteran extraction shooter players. Finally, as you prepare for launch on October 30th, 2025, part of the fun will be reflecting on this story of the accidental feature. It gives you a mental lens with which to evaluate the game. Will you say, "Yeah, I felt that moment," or will you be indifferent? That makes the experience more layered. So there you have it, a full look at one of Arc Raiders' coolest features, a mechanic born from an accident, iterated from player feedback, and now baked into the experience in a meaningful way. It shifts how you deal with defeat, how you enter the fray, and how you psychologically engage with the game. If you're excited about Arc Raiders, keep this story in mind because it tells you a lot about how the game is being built and how you might experience it when it drops. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Did this story change how you feel about Arc Raiders? Do you value subtle design features like this over flashy gimmicks? Are you more or less likely to check it out now? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, hit like, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, and share it with your friends who are into extraction shooters or just curious about game design stories. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Raider out.